In the shadowy world of espionage, trust is a weapon, and betrayal can come from within. Few ever get close enough to expose the enemy, and fewer still survive the experience. Today on Gold Shields, hosts Dan Murphy and Tom Smith sit down with Eric O'Neill, a former FBI agent who walked that dangerous line. O'Neill played a crucial role in taking down one of the most notorious spies in U.S. history, Robert Hanssen. In this episode, O'Neill recounts his intense undercover work, the psychological chess match that kept Hansen in the dark, and the high-stakes moments leading to the spy's arrest. He also reflects on the personal toll it took, the sacrifices made, and how the lessons learned shaped his transition into cybersecurity. Join us as we dive into the world of covert operations, where every conversation could be a trap and every moment could mean life or death. This is the story of courage, intelligence, and the fine art of deception. This is Gold Shields.
Gold Shields brings true stories from law enforcement, the military, true crime authors, and first responders. Experience the dedication, danger, and emotional toll with the heroes themselves. These gripping tales of true crimes, true stories, and true heroes are all here on Gold Shields.
Hey, welcome back to Gold Shields. This is Dan Murphy along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. Waiting for this one for a while because of just what it is and the involvement we had, sort of with it. Robert Hanssen was one of the most dangerous spies that the U.S. ever had. And thanks to this man and a number of others, and he will say that, I know he is because the man that he is, did this incredible investigation and case, which Eric O'Neill played an enormous part in getting this individual off the street. And we will also talk about his career of a cyber expert, and nowadays is so vitally important. We're going to get into that. So Eric O'Neill, thank you so very much for joining us on Gold Shields, and welcome.
Hey, fellas, it's great to be here. And I think I'm going to have to get one of your canisters for my 16-year-old daughter who's a runner. And, we were talking earlier, Tom, about self-defense. And it's just so important, especially for young women who, are running. And I try to convince her, don't run alone, but something lightweight like that would be great.
We will be more than happy to provide you and your daughter with anything you need in that regard. We are coming out with a small keychain size, which is even better for jogging and things like that.
That is perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Eric, anyone who hasn't seen the movie Breach or isn't familiar with the story of Robert Hanssen, you're going to get some of that story today. But suffice it to say that it's when someone spies on their own country for a foreign enemy, it's a tragedy, it's treason, it's the kind of thing that we never want to see. But it's compounded 1,000 times when that person is a trusted member of the Federal Bureau of Investigation at a high level with all the security clearances that enable them to get access to the type of materials our enemies would pay through the teeth for. Eric, you started out your career. Tell us a little about where you're from and what brought you to the FBI in that role.
Sure. Well, I was born into the United States Navy. My father was a submariner. Stationed in Charleston Naval Base. So I was actually the last kid born in that naval hospital in Charleston, South Carolina, before they closed it down. My father was on tour. After he left the Navy, we moved up to Connecticut. He attended Yale Law School. He's a really hard guy. He graduated top in his class in the Naval Academy and then again in Yale, not the top, but up there. So pretty hard act to follow. He took his first law firm job in D.C., and so we have lived in and around the D.C. area. I still live in Maryland, just north of D.C. So I grew up with my first instincts to go to the Naval Academy. That was the plan for my life from the moment I was born, into the Navy, and I was going to one day go. I ended up not going. I ended up going to Auburn University, Got a degree, started in aerospace engineering, didn't finish there. Got a degree in psychology and political science because for some reason I thought that would be better for law than aerospace. That wasn't correct, but it ended up being okay. I decided that I wanted to be a lawyer. So I was still following in some of my father's footsteps, and I graduated with a degree, an undergrad degree in psychology and political science, and then had to go find a job, which was difficult. What do you do with those degrees? So I came back to DC, and I did what everyone in the world was doing in the early or mid 90s, and I became a consultant, and I became a litigation consultant, which I thought was going to be very cool, and it wasn't. It was a lot of manipulating Excel spreadsheets, which is absolutely great. That's what analysts do all day. But as someone in their very early 20s, I was 21. Sitting in a windowless office dealing with Excel spreadsheets was not for me. And so I applied. I always wanted to serve my country. I think I felt a little guilty for not going into the armed service. And so I applied to the FBI, DA, NSA, CIA, Secret Service, just every acronym I could find that looked like it had unique skills that you would not find anywhere else, provided me an opportunity to serve my country. And back then, this was 95. You had to literally send in a postcard, and they sent you just a manila folder of information, and you used one of these old things that used to exist called typewriters, and you typed it up. And it took months to fill out all these applications. And then with a different battery of tests, I mean, you guys are both in law enforcement, you know how this goes, and background tests and psychology interviews and all that kind of stuff, until I came right down to the wire with the FBI and the DEA. And the FBI chose me one day earlier than the DEA. And I have never heard, I still remember the name of the DEA recruiter was Mickey. And I have never heard someone cuss as much as possible when he called and offered me a spot as a DEA special agent. And I told him I'd already accepted with the FBI. I don't want to, you won't be able to publish this on YouTube if I go through the things he said. And because I was at that time only 22 years old, the FBI told me, well, we can't hire you as a special agent as much as we'd like to, but we've got this other program that's classified right now called the Investigative Specialists, or the Special Surveillance Group, aka the Ghosts. Would you look at that? And I thought that was incredibly intriguing, and it, now it's since been declassified, mostly for me. In my book, Gray Day, the FBI gave me permission to talk about these very secret field operatives. And so I joined a team of FBI ghosts who are specially trained to track, investigate, and follow targets wherever they go and whatever they do. And our mandate was to perform counterintelligence and counterterrorism within the United States and protect against foreign adversaries, domestic threats, and keep people safe.
Yeah, you know what? When we were in JTTF, and no matter the size of the case, if we had an enormous international case and there was any part of it here, you're the guys we called. No matter our experience, no matter how much time we had in the NYPD or other departments, you are the team that we called. And let me tell you something, everyone. Ghosts, 100%. You had no idea where you guys were, what you were doing, the hours, and we would get the best detailed reports from you to keep track of our bad guys. I mean, like I said, everyone out there, that's no joke. They were specialists and experts of what they did. And we're going to get into more of that. But that's legit. You guys were on target with any case.
You know what? And to jump on what Tom just said, I cannot agree with you more, and it's 100% accurate. But, for an investigator to be working a case and to be on top of everything you have to be on top of, you simply cannot be, especially with terrorism cases, on top of all the surveillance that's necessary to back up the things you're finding out, the things you're hearing from sources, the things you're hearing from FISA warrants and stuff like that. But you need professionals who are full-time dedicated to being those ghosts, to being your eyes and ears, and that's what SSG is. And so you guys, hats off to them always.
And that's what's important to the Hansen story, because my job was to be in the shadows. I mean, I might be next to you 5 times a day, and each time I looked different. I had a whole disguise kit I traveled around with, and each was more clever than the last. And a lot of it was just being able to blend into any situation. You had to be very much a chameleon. You had to be able to walk into a corporate office and strut that way, or to just sort of be on a college campus and you'd be laid back that way, and everything in between. But we used a lot of technology. We used a lot of mental know-how. We were trained in the tradecraft and the practices and ways that all of the enemy and bad guys would do their things, so that we could spot it instantly. The other thing is we could use their tradecraft, so there was never your targets never could put their finger on you, because you could just rotate through different operational profiles at any given time.
Well, you teed it up, so we might as well go there. One day, just take us through, listen, not everyone, all of us, okay, me, Dan, any other guests we've had on, you always want that case. You want, like, hey, come here, you need to do this. We all hope for that when we start our careers. And you, being as young as you were, got that. So let's start with the introduction to Robert Hanssen and your role.
Yeah, well, I never met Robert Hanssen until I was on the case. I'd never worked undercover to ghost him. There was, in the lead up to the case, a very short period, but this was the most sophisticated, complex, unique case the FBI has ever run, and one of the shortest. Just the way that everything played out. Hanssen, we learned about Hanssen in December of 2000, when a joint task force between the FBI and the CIA were desperately trying to confirm that the wrong man was the mole they were after. And to back up a little bit, the entire intelligence community, and that's not just the FBI, this is CIA, NSA, I mean, everyone, military intelligence, were after a legendary spy that was only known by the codename Gray Suit. And the codename was given, just randomly by the FBI to an individual that they knew was somewhere in the U.S. intelligence community. They had no idea where. They had no idea who. They didn't even know if this was a man or a woman, that had very high-level access and no hesitation to provide it to the Russians. And operations were failing. People were getting rounded up and killed. Covers were being blown. Everything was going wrong. In fact, due to Hansen, it turns out Hansen, let's not foreshadow it too much. Hansen was Gray Suit. Right. Surprise. But due to him, he during the height of the Cold War, we were at a massive deficit. A lot of people don't understand that in the middle of the Cold War, we lost all our spies in Russia. They just were disappeared. They were thrown into hard labor. They were rounded up and executed. And that was because of Hansen and a CIA spy, Aldrich Ames. He also gave our playbook for what we would do if there was a nuclear war, so that Russians knew in advance what we would do in the United States if that happened. So, I mean, I don't think anyone wins, but you definitely don't want to be, lining up the line of scrimmage and the other side has all your plays. So he's a pretty bad guy, and he got away with it for 22 of his 25 years in the FBI. So in December, they learned it's Hansen. And the very small team of agents and CIA officers were crestfallen because Hansen wasn't only a decorated FBI agent, a supervisory special agent that for years had been in charge of auditing the legal attaché offices. These are FBI legats all over the world. There might be 1 or 2 or 6 or 10, FBI agents and employees staffing them. He flew all over the world. He had access to tons of information. He was also the top analyst, Russian analyst. So he knew all the plays. He was like the bank manager stealing from his own bank. And they realized that he was also using computer systems to steal, and the FBI just wasn't prepared for that at that time. So they had a dilemma. Hansen was about to retire in April, and they learned about him in December. So he was going to have his mandatory retirement. get his gold watch and his big pension and ride off into the sunset, and they would lose their opportunity to build a case, an airtight case that not only would convict him, but would put enough pressure on him, which was the most critical part, to get him to say what he'd done so the FBI could fix it. Because the worst thing, it's not exactly what he did that was as bad as what he undid. And what I mean by that is he unraveled American counterintelligence. He turned it into a scrap heap. He gave it all to the Russians, and they knew everything we were going to do before we do it. And so we had to know exactly what he destroyed so we could rebuild. So they had to build a case. And they decided that because this guy had been spent his career complaining and bitching about how the FBI was behind the curveball in computerization, and we needed to be better in computer security and computer know-how if we were ever going to defeat our adversaries and prevent from attackers just like him, they decided to give him a computer job, which they thought would coerce him to stay in the FBI. So, and they also gave him money. They promoted him to executive service. They built a brand new section called the Information Assurance Section in FBI headquarters on the 9th floor, 2 floors above the executive level. So they paid him more. They gave him his own shop. And they said, we're going to give you an employee, and we want you to delay your retirement and take this job. And he was incredibly flattered. And I think in his mind, he was also thinking, now I'm going to be in charge of cybersecurity for the FBI, which means that I'll have access to everything. And he could do his last huge drop and really go out with a bang. And then the FBI had another problem. They needed someone to go work in there with him that could speak to him, that could learn from him, that could get him to trust. And then that person had to find the information, essentially find the smoking gun that was going to lead to his arrest. And they had nobody. I mean, in the legions of agents who were specially trained to do this, they didn't have anyone who could sell the job of cybersecurity, of computerization. They had nobody who turned on a computer, right? And then when they went into the IT staff, none of them knew how to catch a spy. So because the FBI, I mean, they get a lot of criticism, and the bureaucracy is a big pain in the butt. I mean, I think that's everywhere in law enforcement and government. But when there's an operation, when there's a case, there is no agency that's better at just narrowing down, pinpointing, and doing the work without all the rest of the nonsense. So they looked into the legions of the ghosts and found me because I a little bit of a maverick. I got so tired of handwriting my surveillance logs. I wrote a program that did predictive target analysis, and if people were to type their surveillance logs into Word, we could upload it into my analysis program, and then it would do predictive analysis on targets over time. So if you see a Russian buy this telephone pole, 10 times over the next year, we can predict that in the future around this date or that date, they're probably going to be there and be in front of them. And it worked. But of course, when you go outside of the normal channels, you get notoriety, not fame, in the FBI. And so it didn't really get me anywhere until someone said, this guy knows how to turn a computer on, and he knows how to follow a spy. Let's throw him in the room, hope he comes out okay. And that's what they did. And so on a Sunday morning, no idea it was coming, I get a call from my supervisor, and he says, I need to talk to you. He wakes me up and my wife. We were married 3 months at the time, but we're very newlywed. And I said, okay, I'll come downtown. I mean, this was an unusual. I worked 24/7. There was never a day off. The bad guys run, we run after them. And he says, you don't have to come downtown. I'm parked outside your apartment. And this never happens. I mean, your boss doesn't come to you. I mean, it's like, it's like you're a beat cop and your sergeant is outside your house, right? It's like, it just doesn't happen.
Do that. Danny did that to me though, but we'll talk about that.
Okay.
It was
we
never
have to tell the story. But I thought I was getting arrested. I thought I was in trouble, and I was going to walk into like a SWAT team or something because the Russians are great at. I was running a lot of them. They're really good at misinformation, and when they find out who you are, they'll do things like this. And he's just sitting there, Gene McClellan, supervisory special agent, running that team of ghosts, and he's just He's just smiling at me because he knows I'm freaked out. And he asked me, "Have you ever heard of Robert Hanssen?" I said, "No." And he said, "Good, because I want you to go undercover to catch him." And my next meeting is with the director of the FBI up the street, and I need to know right now, are you in or out? And what are you supposed to say to that, right? I said, I'm in. Sure. I took a leap of faith. I knew it was going to be incredibly disruptive to my life. I knew it was going to be something different and completely outside of my comfort zone. But I also knew it was important, and that they were desperate and they needed me to go perform this task. And I just committed to doing it the best of my ability.
So what was your specific role within the information assurance section? Was it you? Was the only two people there, you and Robert Hanssen?
Yes. So the information assurance section was only going to be the two of us, even though in the pit area, so in our skiff, the SCI conference room, which is the vault door, and it has, it's completely walled off and there's no windows. We had a pit area which had 3 desks. That's where I sat. And then Hansen had his own executive office right off of that. There was never going to be other employees. We were telling Hansen that we were going to staff it up and that they were recruiting, but there was always a delay. There was always a problem. So the over job of information assurance for the FBI was just the two of us. And it was a lot of work. I mean, the FBI needed a lot of work in information assurance. And the sad thing is, the two of us were actually really good at it. He had very good ideas. He was kind of lazy, though, so I ended up doing all the work. And I'm good at that. I mean, I ended up leaving the FBI and going to a career in cybersecurity. So the ideas we had were pretty, they were pretty forward-looking and I think innovative. Some of them had been carried forward, but the real job, the covert job, was for me to, really, there were 3 things. Number 1 was don't screw up. I don't think that's the word they used, but let's use that one here. Don't screw up. That's number 1. Like if all you do is don't screw up, you could call it a kind of win. Number 2 was get him to trust you. I had to get him to trust me. And I'm like, how do I do that? I don't, it's like, you got to figure it out, right? So get him to trust me. And number 3 was find the information that's going to lead us to knowing when his next drop is so we can catch him red-handed. And each of those is complex, more complex and difficult than the former one. So look, don't screw up. That means I just have to watch everything I say. He was suspicious going into this, and his only point of attack was me, and he was constant. Gaining his trust, I had to talk to him. I had to have conversations, and the more you do that, the more chance of screwing up. Because he was testing me, he was pushing me. It was this great chess match. And then finally, I had to figure out how we were going to catch him. And that was difficult. But the good news is I managed to do all 3.
You know what? When you think about the pressure you're on, listen, there's the investigative pressure. We all got that. You got to get it done. You got to do it right. You got to do it right enough that if he goes to trial and evidence and all that stuff. So there's always a pressure, even in a homicide, robbery, kidnapping, there's always that pressure of doing it correctly. You're on another stratosphere of pressure of not screwing up because of what it could lead to.
Right.
And to take all that on as, what were you, 22?
By this time I'd been a veteran ghost for a little while. So now I was turning 27.
Okay. The one question I had, going back just a little bit, were you briefed on everything about him?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I knew
so
very
you
little.
were just given what you needed to know to do your job.
I was only told that he is, there was a suspicion of espionage, that we had created this role for him, that you were going to go undercover and watch him, talk to him, call him in and out, right, for the teams, and also gain his trust. And like I said, try to find the information that would lead to his arrest. And but I was told nothing further. It wasn't until halfway through this investigation that when I think I was feeling like I needed out, And part of that was the pressure. I was newly married and wasn't seeing my wife, right? And I was afraid she was going to leave. The other pressure that was on me is I was in law school. And so every night after dealing with Hansen, Kate, if you watch the movie Breach, is played by Laura Linney, who was the special agent assigned to basically help me not screw up, would drive me to law school and we would debrief on the way. And then sometimes she would wait. And after 2 hours of law lectures, she'd pick me up and we'd go back to headquarters because I had to be there for all of the searches of the office for a chain of evidence. And so I was never home. And, it was more and more debilitating to the point where I just didn't, there was a point where I didn't see the case going anywhere. I wasn't sure if this was the right guy. I didn't really know what they knew, because you tell the inside person as little as possible, because anything they tell me is something Hansen could pull out of me if I made a mistake. And I think I asked Kate, I said, I think I need off this case. This is just tearing me apart. I'm not sleeping. My grades are slipping, and I need more time with my wife, and I don't have weekends anymore. And that's when she told me that this isn't just a spy; it's the spy. This is Graysuit. We're sure this is Graysuit. His code name was Gray Day, which is why it's that way. The title of my book is Gray Day. The FBI declassified that code name. And all those code names are derivatives of, is this possibly Graysuit? And it turns out he was. So then I realized this is bigger than I thought. This isn't just some guy that we think is, has dropped something somewhere. This is the guy that everyone in the entire intelligence community has been after for over 2 decades. And I'm sitting across the desk from him every single day. I mean, imagine that. Think about that. Like, this is the most legendary spy on earth, and I'm having lunch with the dude. It changes your whole mindset. And then she started showing me some of the information that we learned and some of the horrible things he did. And I left that meeting with her just deciding I'm gonna get him. I'm gonna catch him. And it really reinvigorated me to the case. And there was a point where I realized that, and it was really Hansen who taught me this. He talked about the military OODA loop, the observe, detect, act, and you moving quickly through it. And the faster you can move against your adversary, the better your chance of winning. And I realized that he was right, and I was reacting to him, always reacting to him. I was so focused on trying not to screw up that I wasn't actually pursuing my case. And I realized that, look, when I was a ghost, I took risks. I did crazy stuff. I hung off balconies, I went flying around the Beltway. I did the things you needed to do to catch your bad guy. And if you don't take some risks in life, you don't get anywhere.
So
and I had to start doing that.
I have a twofold question. First of all, everything you said is in line with what real detectives, investigators, and agents do, which is when you got somebody bad, you pull out the stops. You do what you have to do. And kudos to you for doing that. Our nation is a safer place because of it. That's no hyperbole. Twofold question. First, how did you get him to trust you? Was there anything? The movie portrays you rallying around his strong Catholic faith. And the second part of it is, how did you get intelligence? The movie portrays he had a Palm Pilot. Were those factually correct, or where do they differ?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. He started to trust me. It was even before we started going to church together. He began to trust me because we were having many conversations. He realized, I think, that, and the FBI set this up very well. We had a lot of things in common, believe it or not. We were both old hackers that, he was doing bad things. I was just trying to make security stronger by figuring out how to break it. Back in the day, we knew how to program. He respected the fact that I had a high level of computerization, that I could talk the talk and walk the walk with him. We had a lot of conversations. His son was in law school. I was in law school, and so that was something we had in common. We could talk about. And then the faith. He just out of the blue asked me to go to church with him, and it was the middle of the day at the Catholic Information Center, which is right down the street. I didn't even know it had a chapel in the back. And he realized, look, I'm a good Catholic boy. I was raised by a Italian mother and an Irish father. I'm about as Catholic as you can get on both sides, in one ear and in the other ear, right? And when he was looking at me, I think it was the most confident I ever felt in the entire case is when we're standing there in church and the Our Father comes, Our Father out in heaven, right? And he's looking right at me. And I was like, oh, I know this is fair. I'm not letting Sister Rose down right now. Yeah, I got this. and he just kind of gave a nod, like, okay, this guy's not full of shit. And sorry. And he,
right.
And we, there was it was a different conversation when we left that first time going to church. It was all about. Then it became about my wife and about having children, about pursuing my faith. And he told me he wanted to sponsor me into Opus Dei, and he was going to mentor me, and he was going to show me all the things that I needed to know, and he did. And I realized that he needed someone like me. He wanted to prove his genius to someone who was trapped and had to listen, right? But he also came to respect me, and that was important because it turns out that getting this guy's respect was next to impossible. He hated everybody. And disliked people. He was a supreme narcissist. It drove everybody in the FBI crazy, and somehow I managed to do it. And the case agents behind me were ecstatic about it. They were really happy. And then there was a point where the dialogue took a weird turn, and I met with one of the top supervisory special agents on the task force that I'd never met before. He just showed up, found me somewhere, and sat down across from me. Wasn't very nice about it. He led off by saying, we expect that when this case goes wrong, when it fails, it'll be you. And I learned later that this was the dude who advocated strongly for me not to be put in that role. But he also said that we believe he's recruiting you, and we want it to happen. So go with it. And we never quite got there. He definitely was recruiting me, but we caught him before he could finish that thread.
In the darkest of nights, you need a light you can trust. That's why we rely on Streamlight. Whether you're investigating a scene, navigating through uncharted territory, or just need a dependable flashlight for those unexpected moments, Streamlight is your go-to source. With over 45 years of innovation, Streamlight crafts rugged, high-performance flashlights that can withstand the toughest conditions. From tactical torches for law enforcement to everyday carry lights, Streamlight has you covered. Join the Streamlight community today and see why professionals trust Streamlight for their lighting needs. Visit streamlight.com to find your perfect light. Streamlight, lighting your way through the shadows.
Introducing 221B Tactical, where innovation meets safety. Founded by a veteran police officer, 221B Tactical creates cutting-edge gear designed to keep you protected and comfortable in the toughest conditions. From the revolutionary MaxDri vest that keeps body armor users cool and dry, to high-performance gloves and tactical apparel, every product is field-tested by professionals on the front lines. Eliminate the impossible with 221B Tactical, where gear isn't just built, it's built to protect. Visit 221btactical.com and gear up today.
Looking for powerful defense without the mess? Meet Impact, a revolutionary line of chemical irritants designed for law enforcement, military, and personal protection. With no blowback, no cross-contamination, and easy cleanup, Carry Impact delivers unmatched stopping power without the hassle. Whether you're in the field or on the street, safety should never be compromised. Protect yourself with the next generation of defense. Carry Impact. Stopping power redefined.
Wow. My God. Now, while you're going through this, and this just popped into my head, I have like a bunch of questions in my head, but I'll go one at a time. while this is all going on and the trust is coming in and you're feeling comfortable, do you have to, you're a human being, do you have to like kind of go, I'm still nailing your ass?
Yes.
And
Oh,
just
yeah.
like kind of like come back to neutral of, okay, yeah, you're being nice to me, but you're still the worst person walking through this country right now.
Right. No, definitely. There was a point where I get asked, did you respect him? Yeah, I respected him, and there was a point where I was feeling very friendly toward him. But then I did like you said, you got to take risks. So I did a search on my own in the office, which you don't do, and he left his bag. He never left his bag. I saw an opportunity. I went into it. There was a data card. I took a look at it. And then I told the team, I think you guys really need to come get this. And we had him in the pocket. They sent a team. They went and they grabbed the data card. It was a big mistake. He had to leave it behind. And on it were letters that he had written to the Russians. So we knew at that point definitively this was the guy. And once they let me read those letters, I said, no. Now it's on. I was mad. And then I had to go in there every day against an adversary and pretend that I was still his friend. And that was hard. That was a lot of acting. You learn to be a very good actor on the spot as a ghost. I've had conversations with Ryan Philby, who plays me in the movie Breach, about this, and he would chuckle, and he was like, "That's basically what I do all day." And that it's just another way we're similar. But yeah, actors have to do this. They have to immerse themselves in a role and become that person, and it's hard because it's not you. It's very false, and I'm not very good at lying unless I've got a badge and the FBI says you can lie, right? So it turns out that I was actually good at that. I was able to do it, but I had to stomach a lot of bile, and to be undercover that way. And but I was hell bent on catching him, and I watched and I listened and I waited, and I learned about him, and I discovered that he had this weird routine, and it had to do with, and you brought it up, Dan, it had to do with his Palm Pilot. And he loved this thing, this device that this is actually the one. I was pointing my finger right. It's all reversed, This is the Palm Pilot that was used in the movie Breach. And maybe you can't see it. I don't know if you're
we will later.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I got it in my background. And it's a big thing. It's a big fat device. You would never walk around with something like this. You look ridiculous. I mean, our smartphones are a fraction of the size, but he loved the thing, and he kept it in his left back pocket when he wasn't using it. And every time he sat down, he couldn't sit on it. He'd pull it out and put it in his bag right next to his desk. And when he stood up like clockwork, he'd grab it. So there was a routine there, and we use routines to protect information. Every one of us, when we come home, we put our keys on the hook or in the basket, or they're not there when you need to leave, right? That's a routine. He also told me when I asked him about the thing that he encrypted it himself. He wrote his own encryption. So that's important too. Like, well, you don't do that, right? Now, most of us can't write our own encryption, but you encrypt things that you want to protect, and especially from prying eyes, things that matter to you, things that are critical, things that are important. And he loved this Palm Pilot. I mean, he talked about the device more than his wife and children. So in my mind, I said, we got to get away from him. We got to see what's on there. And how do you do that when the guy he has it, on his behind all the time, unless the only time it wasn't on his person is when he was sitting down and it was right next to him, and he knew exactly where it was. So we had to social engineer him, and I sat down with Kate and we came up with a plan, and another, and the section chief who was on the floor, Richard Garcia, who's still a dear friend. All these people are very close. And, three of us came up with a plan for how we were going to get Hansen away from this thing. With sufficient time for me to run down 3 flights of stairs and get it to a tech team who was just sitting there for days and days waiting for us to get it right. And we managed to do it.
It's a fascinating scene in the movie. Of the tension is almost unbearable. You're in the office trying to get this done, and then when you get it back, trying to put it back in so it was just the way you had found it, because he's so particular. So much psychology that goes on in watching this movie and hearing you talk about Robert Hanssen. You know, as a narcissist, as a sociopathic narcissist, and I think you picked up on it intuitively, you have got to let him know that every word that comes out of his mouth is genius and profound. Everything he does is the best way in the world. And if you can be seen to him, he's looking for a protege. He's looking for somebody to look up to him. Narcissists want people to look at them as though they have the sun shining in the morning. And you did that to him. And like you said, bile moments when you tasted your own bile at how sickened you were, that you had to do this with somebody who is the most prolific spy, the most egregious things that he had done against our country for 22 of his 25-year FBI career. And you despised him, but you had to do that. And then the stress level, I mean, Ryan Phillippe does a great job portraying that in the movie, but the way of describing it is just, wow. Hats off to you. I don't know how, I mean, your wife is a saint, let's put it that way, just for putting up with you, right? I mean, because the whole family goes through this when you go through this, right? And you can't tell anybody what you're working on, can you?
Yeah, I spend a chapter in my book talking about the stresses and the rigors of working undercover and what it does to your family, because you hit the nail on the head. It was hard and very stressful. I think that moment when and for the audience, Rich Garcia came up with this idea that he was going to come in and challenge him to shoot. That was going to get him away. We were on the 9th floor. The shooting range is in the parking garage. It's in a sub-basement of FBI headquarters. It's all the way down the bottom, and it takes forever to get down there. There's 2 elevators you have to take to get down there. So if you sprinted, it was like 10 minutes. So we knew we'd have a good amount of time. We also read into the case an assistant director, an ADIC that Hansen hated. He just despised this guy. So I'm sitting there having a conversation with him across his desk, and I clandestinely send a text that, we're go, where he couldn't see underneath the desk. And Rich and the ADIC come in and challenge him to shoot. Don't give him a choice. So now he's really mad because he didn't like to be challenged. He didn't like anyone above him in authority. And but he was a shooter. He loved shooting. He was a dead shot, and he had tons of guns. And so he grabs all his stuff and he trudges off after them. I grabbed the Palm Pilot, that same data card and a floppy disk, and ran down 3 flights of stairs and handed it off to the tech team, and they're doing their thing. And as they're doing their thing, I get another text that says, he's on his way back to you. And I have the CCTV footage, which gave it to me much later. And he sends his target down the line, and he empties a clip and he brings it back. It was a great grouping, by the way, right in the center. You don't want to be in a shootout with him. And he doesn't even unclip his target. He just holsters his firearm, doesn't say goodbye, doesn't say a word, just walks out. Because I think he realized I left all my stuff behind, and do I really trust Eric? I'm sure that was going through his mind. If I ever could have talked to him again, I would have asked him. And I'm standing there 3 floors down, and I know he's coming to me. That was the worst. And I told the tech team, they're just chill. Yeah, it's encrypted. We're going to copy it. We'll crack the encryption later. And I'm like, you don't understand. He's armed and I'm not. I'm not going to win this confrontation. You need to give me this stuff, and I need to get up there before him, or it's game over. It's all over. And, it's not like a James Bond movie where he cuts the wire to the bomb and it's 0.2 seconds. I had a few minutes, and, timing. I timed all this. So I run up the 3 flights of stairs. I slam that big door to the skiff, and that's what saved me. I march through my office into his office, and I kneel down in front of the bag. And the most, terrifying moment of my life thus far is looking at that bag and realizing I have 3 devices and there are 4 pockets, and I don't have the slightest idea which pockets I pulled them all out of. And he's coming through the door. So I just dropped all 3, zipped everything up, ran back to my desk. I put the best poker face I've ever had, like right here, and hoped and prayed that I got it right. I knew I got it wrong. I mean, because there's no way. The odds are completely against me. There's just no way I got it right. And I'm sitting there thinking, he's going to come out and just shoot me. I'm taking a shot. I'm going to get plugged. It's over. And there was a moment right then that I thought, who cares? I'm just so tired. I'm done with this. and this was my mistake. I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to run down the hall, to Rich Garcia's office. He was always ready if I needed an escape plan. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to just try and talk my way out of it, because if I'm not here when he leaves his office, if he sees an empty room, even if I got it right, he's going to cut and run. There's no way he makes that last drop, because by then we learned, I'd found that he was going to make a drop. We had the information. And if we just didn't know when, and I thought we'd learn by getting that Palm Pilot, because it's a calendar, right? And I knew that if I wasn't there and I didn't talk my way him back into this case, then he'd never make that final drop, and it would be over. All this would have been for nothing. And so I sat there and I was just going to take whatever came out of that office. I was just going to take it full on the chin and try my best to deal with it. Turns out I got the pockets right, because he leaned over my desk.
He's just going to say
howled
that.
at me. Yeah, he did this whole thing where the CIA people call it like the Jedi mind trick, where they just stare at you and they hold the stare, and they stare again. I'll move in a little closer, and then finally go, "Yeah, it's fine. I did it. It's me." Right? Like, if that ever works, I don't know. Maybe it works for them sometimes. But I didn't. I just looked. I glanced back at him. And I was like, "What?" And I want to bring up something you said, Dan, because it really stuck with me. He was a narcissist, but he was the kind of narcissist that was always also a bully. So you couldn't just give him back everything you're saying is glowing. He didn't respect me until I started challenging him. I say, "That's BS. I don't believe you." And he'd have to keep trying to prove his point, And the more I pushed back, the more he would kind of chuckle and smile. And that's where I really started getting respect. Because a bully, if you are always falling down and showing your belly, they will never respect you, ever, ever, ever. Every once in a while, you got to punch them in the nose, that actually, they can understand that. I just gave him this look like, "What's your problem?" And he said, "Were you in my office?" I said, "Yeah, I was in your office. I put a memo in your inbox. Didn't you see it? It's sitting right there. Go check." And he does that look, that glance, and then he says, "I never want you in my office again." And he leaves for the day. Like a couple of weeks later, he's on a bridge in Foxstone Park, and he's just made his final drop to the Russians. And he's like full of vim and vigor and happy and elated. And he's going to leave the FBI, retire, get his pension. In a few nights, he's going to go pick up his 50 grand that's going to be left by Russian intelligence under a platform in an amphitheater for him. Get his gold watch, and he's already lined up a job at a cybersecurity company. And as he's retracing his steps, two vans screech to a halt. They block him in. Panel doors open. FBI agents jump out, point their guns at him, and he says, "The guns are not necessary, right?" And then he says, "What took you so long?" And he's arrested for espionage. We not only knew where he would make that final drop to the Russians, but exactly when, on a Sunday in February, right before President's Day, because the Palm Pilot's a calendar. So that was our smoking gun, our literal smoking gun that caught him and just made the entire case.
So you realize the statement he made when confronted was a narcissistic statement.
Oh, absolutely.
I am so much smarter than you. It took you so long to catch me.
That's exactly right. Yep. And I always thought, I advocated, with my little voice, right, in this room of all my betters, that we shouldn't arrest him then. Let him get away with it. And then when we were back, the plan I came up with is let him get away with it, go home, think he's just won, the whole world is amazing. And on Tuesday, when he comes back to the office, I would set up a meeting in Quantico to go talk to their tech division, drive to the parking lot, park the car in the center of the parking lot, get out of the car and walk away, and without saying a word. And then my plan, my idea was have an agent he really respects, one of the older guys, just walk up and get in the car with him and just shake his hand and say, "Bob, we know, we got you. We were there on Sunday. We saw everything. It's over. Just tell me what you did." And I think he would have sat there for hours and told the guy everything. because he just wanted to. He was desperate to do it. He's desperate to let someone know his genius. And I think that if we had done it that way, in sort of a more polite way that fed his ego, he wouldn't have lawyered up and we'd have gone through everything we had to go through. But when they arrested him and put his face in the ground, like 2 blocks from his house in the middle of his neighborhood, he was angry. And as you said, Dan, that narcissism took over, and, he's that snide remark. And then, you'll hear from my lawyer, and, the case took a lot longer.
Wow. I mean, that, it's hard. Yeah. I mean, it's, you think of the movie and it's not a movie. It's real life. It's not made up. You can look at the movie as what it is, but all that took place. And,
in fact, that arrest scene, Tom, in the movie, was shot at the exact time of night in the exact spot that it happened at Foxstone Park in Vienna, Virginia. And the arresting agents who put the cuffs on him were there on set to make sure that that Dennis Haysbert got it all completely right. There's that scene where he grabs Hansen by the back of the head and helps him into the squad car, and he says, "It's a sad day for all of us, Bob." That's Dennis Haysbert, that awesome voice.
That iconic voice that he has, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm still kicking myself because I hung out with Dennis all day, because between takes, he would just come over and chat with me. And you think of these things later, I should have just grabbed my phone and said, "Hey, Dennis, would you record my voicemail for me?" It would have been like epic. I would still have it. It would have been amazing.
That's so true.
That's great. That's
and
great.
It's true about him. I mean, listen, one of my favorite TV shows is 24, so he'll always be the president, for sure.
Well, here's a great story for you. I love 24. It's outrageous, it's silly, but it was basically, I would watch Kiefer Sutherland play Jack Bauer, and I later met Kiefer. I met him last year at South by Southwest, and I told him this story too, and he absolutely loved it. And then he's like, "Come over to the bar with me. I'm gonna buy you a beer." And so Dennis comes up to me, and so my wife and I, look, we never watched it on TV because the whole DVR thing, and we would miss an episode, and it was freaking terrible, and no one wanted to wait a week. So we would wait for it to wrap, and then we'd buy the box set. And we watched the whole thing in like 24 hours. It was like a marathon. It's binge watching before there was binge watching. So Dennis comes up to me, and the first thing he said to me was like, "Hey, Eric, I just really wanted to meet you. You're the real guy, and we're doing this all because of you. And I heard something." I was like, "Uh-oh." And he says, "Yeah, some of the producers told me you're a big 24 fan." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're President Palmer, right?" And he said, "Yeah, you must have really hated it when I died." I was like, "What?"
Oh, no.
I'm a season behind. Like I'm not caught up. Like we buy the whole. I told him we buy the box set, and he was like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry." Well, you'll be watching for it then, won't you?
Oh no.
So that whole season, I'm just waiting for President Palmer to be assassinated. And,
Oh my God. So Hansen gets arrested, and obviously gets convicted, and I'm going to assume he's in Florence in the Supermax.
Well, he pled guilty. The case was so airtight, even the number one attorney for spies, Plato Kacharis, who has since passed on, couldn't get him off and told him, "Look, you're done, dude. It's over." And Hansen's plea deal was that his family was allowed to keep his pension, or portion of his pension. There's no reason to make them destitute. He had like 7 kids and all these grandkids. And they got to keep the house and the cars, which would have all been seized because it's all ill-gotten gains. And in return, he would have life in prison with no chance for parole, and he would spend the rest of his life being debriefed and interrogated and explain what he'd done, which was the real goal of the intelligence community. That's what they needed. They needed him to be a source. And that's why in Gray Day, I call him the modern architect of the FBI, because for years, he lectured on all the things he'd done, all the programs he'd destroyed, and how he'd done it. And that allowed the FBI to rebuild itself into a far more resilient community of intelligence that was resistant to not only a trusted insider like Hansen from the inside, but an outside penetrator trying to steal through a cyber attack, because Hansen knew all the avenues. So he did make the FBI, he made the FBI stronger, and that's what happens to a lot of companies that are breached. They come back, they do the work, and they're far more secure. And he's not alive anymore. He spent his last days in Florence, Colorado, and he passed away in natural causes in June. And that was the end of the story of Hansen.
An incredible story. I mean, the work you do, and like we said, we've all been involved in big cases, but the level of stress and what you were facing is immeasurable. I mean, to put any of us in that situation is wild, and you did. And like Dan said before, thankfully you did, because you made this country safer. So the Hansen case is done. You have a whole nother world that you are now doing. And every time I go on LinkedIn or whatever, there as you are doing a keynote speak or cyber intelligence conference or whatever. Tell us what you're doing now.
Sure. Well, I left. I didn't stay in the FBI that much longer. I actually went back to the street, and it just didn't fit anymore. I realized that working undercover against an adversary was a skill I had, and you discover these skills in your life, sometimes in the oddest ways. And I also realized that if I did go back to Quantico to special agents class, which I could have done, and then done this dangerous undercover work, I wasn't going to stay married. And that was my priority. So I chose to leave the FBI, finish law school, practiced law for quite some time. I did national security law, which kind of fit, right? One of the big firms, and then decided to start my own company. And I started a company called the Georgetown Group about 15 years ago that does competitive intelligence and investigative services for corporate clients. So, not in the government side. And continued to do a lot of the work that I did in the FBI in discovering whether you could trust. And so we do a lot of work in transactions. We do a lot of work in litigation. I'm still looking for smoking guns, and I'm still trying to catch spies. They're just cyber spies. And as I was doing this, I realized that there's a story here, and I started speaking. In the early days of my speaking, it was mostly about the Hansen case, but I transitioned since then to still talking about the Hansen case, because you never go up on stage without, playing your one greatest hit. So we still tell that story. But I realized that I had a message in the world of cybersecurity. I had a voice that I wanted people to hear, and some ideas and theories that were based on FBI counterintelligence that I think needed to be translated into the world of cyber. And I was one of the earliest people to get up on stage and just look at the crowd and say, look, everybody, stop thinking about cyber attacks as some kid in the basement. These are sophisticated threat actors that are just like spy agencies. And if you're not trying to catch spies, you're not going to catch the bad guys, and they're going to win. And for a while, people were like, oh, there's Eric O'Neill. He's got spies in the brain. But you know what? It turned out I was right. I was 100% right. And now all cybersecurity is counterintelligence. Because if it isn't Russia or China or Iran or North Korea trying to come after your company, which happens, it is a sophisticated cybercrime syndicate that's using the dark web and is just as proficient in their attacks because they've hired people from all those countries to help them. And that's what we're up against. So if we don't think like spy hunters, we can't stop the bad guys.
Right. And we can't be reactive. We have to be proactive. Absolutely.
Exactly. So since that case, I'm a public speaker. I'm an author. My next book is coming out soon. It'll be out next year, 2025, called The Invisible Threat, which is everything you need to know about all the ways that attackers are trying to compromise us using deceptive, traditional espionage techniques, and the ways that we can think like spies and act like spy hunters in order to protect ourselves. So it's a cybersecurity book, but it's written the same day Gray Day is. It's fun. It uses storytelling. It uses the story of the middle of a ransomware attack that I found myself in, and I had to find my way out of as the carry through story, and then has countless other stories that are really fascinating about different kinds of attacks and the ways we can defend against them.
It's incredible. I mean, you have some career, man. Starting off with a bunch of applications of where you want to end up and end up here, in the middle of the biggest case the FBI ever ran, like you said, to such a successful career and cyber's it. That's in my mind our next attack. That's where it's going to come when we're so vulnerable here, and need people like you educating this government, educating businesses of what this next threat is going to be. And we've talked about it before in other shows. That's where it's going to be. And, you breathe a little easier when we have people like you on our side, Eric. And I'm not just saying that because you're on our show, but your expertise is what we rely on. And thank you for everything you're doing on that front.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So, we talked about big cases. Tom and I have both been privileged to work on big cases. But then there's the Mac Daddy of cases. And frankly, the Robert Hanssen case was the Mac Daddy of national security cases. Literally. I mean, you couldn't have worked on something bigger, and you couldn't have been in a more dangerous position, a more tenuous position. You were thrown to the wolves, so to speak, and you came out beautifully on behalf of the American people. And we owe you a debt of gratitude for your dedication, your commitment, your expertise, your savvy, all the things that you had to probably pull every skill you never even thought you had out to convince Bob Hansen to trust you so that you could move that case forward. And you made history, and it's an honor to meet you. And I know our audience is going to have loved this show. So thank you for giving us your time today.
Yeah, it's my honor. Thank you guys for having me on. And in these circumstances, you either fail or you rise up, right? And if you don't have the skill, you got to find it. I always say that I learned how to catch Hansen from Hansen. The dude, it turns out when you got him going, he liked to talk, and I was listening. I was listening and I was learning, and I found a way to win. And that's where we are in life so many times. It's you get thrown into a fire, and you got to crawl your way out. And if you don't, you get burned up. And so, finding that will within me was what helped me win this case.
Amazing. And I think you summed it up. Listening is a lost art. Listening is what it's all about, because that's the education and that's the intel when you just listen. And you do that masterfully.
It turns out I used that psychology degree after all.
We have we could probably spend 12 hours on this, but I have some emails from a barrister in Nigeria who wants me to move a check for him I have to get to.
Yeah, I think you really need to read my forthcoming.
Yeah. I'd like to think our audience got that.
Right.
If they don't, they need to read everything you've ever written. That's for sure.
So great. So great. Eric, listen, thank you again for taking the time in your busy schedule to talk about this such important case, and you're a great guy and willingness to do so. Thank you so very much. Don't go anywhere, because I want to talk to you about something when we're done. Dan, we keep doing it, and we keep coming up with these guests that just blow our mind and entertain our audience.
Yep, Eric O'Neill is the bottom of the ninth in the World Series Game 7 Grand Slam. I mean, this is the kind of guest that when we first started, Eric, not to make you blush, honestly, when we first started this podcast, we never envisioned we would get the quality and the amazing stories and the people that we've met doing it. And you are absolutely just the tip of the spear. You're a phenomenal guy. Can't wait to meet you in person, shake your hand, and maybe tip a pint or something. But it's just, we wish you nothing but the best in everything that you continue to do. And we thank you again for your time and for your service to our country.
Yeah, thank you very much. And congratulations on almost closing in on 100 podcast episodes. That is a massive accomplishment. That's something I never had the courage to do.
We didn't at first either, and now we're here. So this wasn't planned. We had 7 shows lined up in the beginning of this, and didn't know what number 8 was going to be. And here we are talking to Eric O'Neill about the Robert Hanssen case almost 3 years later. So Eric, thank you again. This time, everybody, we say a prayer for our law enforcement officers out there, their families, themselves, in federal, state, local, whatever it is. They do a tough job every single day and don't ask for anything in return. And Eric just explained in his story how important family is. Family gets impacted by law enforcement careers. So keep them all in your prayers. Say hi to them, give them a wave when you see them on the street, as well as our military vets. Don't forget them. So for my partner, Dan Murphy, for Eric O'Neill, this is Tom Smith for Gold Shields. Everyone, youtube.com/@goldshields, as well as all our audio channels. Find us, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. And our website, thegoldshieldshow.com. Everyone out there, stay safe. We'll see everybody soon.